Okay, let's go over the answers to the quizzes on minimalism. Most of the questions that were asked in these quizzes were simply comprehension questions, observation questions. The only one that really required you to do much more than that is the last one of the final quiz, quiz number 4. And it goes, what recent dramatic series currently available via streaming services used music from Einstein on the Beach in one of its episodes? I was pleased to note that most of you found the correct answer, which is Mr. Robot. A few more of you said the Netflix series Soundtrack, and I'm guessing since several of you came up with that, I'm thinking it's probably true. I haven't seen that one, but and I didn't find any references to it, but you're probably correct about that. And then a couple more said Frasier. And I looked up the Frasier reference, and it referred to Einstein on the Beach in the dialogue. You didn't actually hear the music. The joke there was that the character of Frasier was talking about falling asleep during Einstein on the Beach, which, if you think about 4.5 hours of very abstract music and actions, that tends to be a common reaction. The point of this question is, once again, to illustrate how music from the art world sort of creeps into popular culture. And you watch these segments from Einstein on the Beach, and it's like nothing you would ever watch on TV or you would see on Broadway or something like that. It's much more abstract and arty than anything that the most of the public would see. But the point is that it does find its way into things like this series. The way this question was asked, not really giving you any information on it, was to exercise your skills to research and to find out information. If you didn't bother looking or didn't try very hard, then you're not going to find the answer. But most of you did. What you needed to do was think about what is a series. What are things associated with the series? And so giving myself no other information, I tried typing in Einstein on the Beach and series, and I eventually found it, but it was not easy. And so I thought, what would be something, a way to refine this search so to make it easier? I thought, well, episodes. Series have episodes. So then I typed in Einstein on the Beach, episodes, and it came right up, Mr. Robot. So that was actually pretty easy if you just think about how to search for information. Another way is, I went to Wikipedia, looked up Einstein on the Beach, and then scrolled down to the section of in popular culture or influences or things like that, and there it was listed as the first item in makes an appearance on this series, Mr. Robot. It was actually quite easy. So let's go over the answers. The technique where the two identical phrases gradually go out of sync with each other is phasing. Does Steve Reich like traditional romantic composers? No. And I think this shows, just because you like one type of art music or classical music doesn't mean that you like everything in the classical. At what age did Reich first listen to The Rite of Spring? Age 14. Which 12-tone composer did Reich study composition with? Luciano Berio. What jazz musician made an impression on Steve Reich? That was John Coltrane. One of the earliest minimalist works in C by Terry Riley. What was Steve Reich's contribution? That would be, he came up with the idea to have a steady pulse, a drummer or a person banging on C the whole time. What are the featured performers on It's Gonna Rain? Not everyone got this. It was a street preacher and a pigeon flapping its wing. What does Brian Eno say is a necessary part of listening to a piece like It's Gonna Rain? You have to sort of use your imagination, or your brain has to sort of make connections between things. All right, quiz 2. How did Reich become acquainted with sounds of trains? He wrote on them when he was a young child. How does Reich provide the sound of train whistles in different trains? It uses violins to do that. Why is the 1940s Holocaust meaningful to Steve Reich? Well, Steve Reich is Jewish, he lives in New York, and he has relatives that lived in Europe during that time, and he realized that if he had lived in Europe, then he would have been a victim. What pop group used a portion of Steve Reich's electric counterpoint? That was The Orb. I'm not sure they were known in this country, but it seems like they were popular in England. Who was Daniel Pearl? He was a journalist who was kidnapped by extremists and eventually executed. Why did Reich write Daniel Variations? His way of trying to do something good with the situation. And what does Reich say that the piece is really about? It's about our current situation. It's about us. So it's about Daniel Pearl, but usually when a literary construction is made or an artwork is made, there's usually an immediate meaning and a larger meaning as it relates to the world. Quiz 3. Why did the creators decide to call Einstein on the Beach an opera, even though it doesn't have a story? Well, they didn't know what else to call it, and it used all the trappings of an opera, the performing space, the performers, and so on. How long does Einstein on the Beach last? 4.5 hours. You might say 5 hours without intermission. Why didn't Philip Glass want to do an opera about Charlie Chaplin? He was a performer already, so his artwork is already done. Why was Einstein in the news following World War II? He had a connection with atomic energy, and that was a big topic at the time. Why do Philip Glass and Robert Wilson say that it's not necessary to tell a story about Einstein? They expect the audience members to show up to the opera already knowing something about Einstein. If it was, so this is not an informational type of play or opera, but where you learn something. It's more, again, associational, as one of the other questions talks about. Why are the explorations of time in the opera relevant to Einstein? Well, Einstein, his famous theory of relativity has to do with the way that time and travel behave. Alright, Glass states, in a play like Shakespeare's Hamlet, the epiphany or emotional high always occurs at the same place. What did Glass notice about Beckett's play Comedy? He noticed that every time he watched it, the epiphany, that as he felt it, was in a different place every time. And that goes back to what Brian Eno said about listening to minimalist music, is that your brain is part of the creative process in creating the work of art. And it's different every time. Why do you think Robert Wilson says that it's easier to see a Baroque candelabra on a rock rather than on a Baroque table? Alright, so this is a good question. I would say contrast and whether or not something seems in place. If you have a Baroque candelabra on a Baroque table, it seems like that is where it's supposed to be. And so it kind of just blends in with the scenery. Whereas if you put a Baroque candelabra on a rock, candelabras aren't supposed to be on rocks. And so you tend to notice that, hey, wait, that's not where it's supposed to be. Why is it there? You tend to notice it more. How did Robert Wilson prompt Christopher Knowles to write 12 chapters of Checks? Well, he kept asking him a question over and over again about something he didn't know the answer to. And for some people, this man Christopher Knowles, as far as we can tell, is highly autistic. And Robert Wilson seems to be that way a little bit as well. And sometimes you can elicit very creative things by asking somebody to think about something, and that becomes sort of the source of a lot of creative thought. What early TV personality does Robert Wilson cite as being an expert in timing? That's Jack Benny. How does Robert Wilson get his performers to do precisely timed movements? Well, practice, but also counting. He says, well, just count, this many counts to this position, this many counts to this position. You hear them telling them in there. The opera includes an actor dressed up as Albert Einstein playing a violin. Did Einstein actually play the violin in real life? And the answer is yes. In fact, he was friends with Shinichi Suzuki. Suzuki was the inventor of the Suzuki method for teaching violin and other string instruments. So if you ever took music lessons as a child, or if you have children that take music lessons, good chance that they'll be involved in the Suzuki method. And quiz 4. What does Philip Glass means when he says this work is associational? Well, we talked about that before. We're presenting things that you're supposed to associate it with ideas you have already in your head. Your mind and your thoughts are supposed to sort of make up these relationships, and therefore that's where a lot of the art in this sort of production comes from. Does Glass highly value his early compositions? No. And so they weren't really worth much. Ravi Shankar, what did Philip Glass learn when he worked with Ravi Shankar? To look at rhythmic processes more than melodic and harmonic ones, which is sort of opposed to the way that Western music works. And so that was one of the innovative things about Einstein on the Beach and other of Philip Glass's work. What is the mistake that performers often make when trying to count out 7? They would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 7 has 2 syllables, so it really adds up to 8 syllables in all. And so you have to count it with 7 as one syllable in order for it to work. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. When people ask Robert Wilson what his work is about, what does he tell them? He says, I don't know. Perhaps he doesn't know, but also he wants people to sort of make up their own minds. Again, associational, he wants people to think about what each thing means, and everybody's going to come away with something different. All right, usually music consists of similar phrase lengths. So, bars of 4, bars of 3, something like that. In knee play 1, there are 3 different phrase lengths. What are these 3 different phrase lengths? 4, 6, and 8, because they're counted out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it makes it very clear those rhythmic relationships.